A long time ago, on a comics page far, far away. Greetings and welcome to May the Panel Be With You, the Star Wars comic book show brought to you by the Punch Up Entertainment Network. I am your humble host, Mike Gargoni, and joining me, as always, the Dr. Evazan to my Ponda Baba, it is John Campbell.
That's our classic opening right there. That's what
I switched it
want.
this time. I switched it.
Yeah. Oh, sure, yeah. We go both ways, as we often say.
Look, sometimes you got a Ponda bottom, sometimes you got a Evazan top. That's just all. That's what you got to do.
I think that is how I see it with those two.
Oh yeah, it's 100% their relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, hello everybody. We're back in the magical world of Star Wars manga.
Yeah, no, we've gone in every single direction in terms of how we wanted to cover these issues, and it turns out our default of do it issue by issue is just what we fall back on.
Well, we were so ready because we talked about this last week a little bit, but it is the thing. We did the 97 special edition adaptations, and we were like, oh man, there was not enough material. So we and shame on us for short-sighting this, but we thought, well, that's just kind of what these are going to be. But this has really surprised us in being a really original, captivating adaptation that does enough interesting stuff. We can actually talk about this issue to issue.
Absolutely. So yes, today we are covering Star Wars: A New Hope manga number 2. Created, drawn, again, exactly how much of this is credits where it's due, we're a little uncertain because information about this book is a little bit harder to track down. Even so far as, like, is Heiseo Tamaki, the listed penciler of this adaptation, a single person?
We still don't know about that. We just don't know. And yeah, the actual, like, writing of it, I guess, is just, one would argue, is just the George Lucas text, but somebody still has to, like, condense that and put... I don't know, man. I mean, we were just before we were recording this, you were struggling to even find when this came out.
Yeah, I have established that this was released the second, like, because like a lot of manga, they're released in like small, booklets essentially, and eventually it would be released as a larger omnibus. But this number 2 was originally published August 12th, 1998.
There you go, because this is, on at least on the digital version that we're looking at on the app, 78 pages of content. So that's a good amount. That's a lot of bang for your buck right there.
Right, and it plays into some stuff we talked about last time in terms of like why manga isn't traditionally colored the way American comics are.
Right. Because
it is released in these larger chunks and a lot more quickly, usually on a weekly basis. This one wasn't. Totally. But
yeah. I mean, like I said, that is a thing in terms of being sort of an outsider to it that can be daunting is, good Lord, there's so much of this.
Yes. But like we talked about last time as well, like you can blaze through it kind of at a similar pace as like more traditional American comics as we view them, because the art asks less of you to like read, and you can kind of like flip through it a little bit more effectively.
Well, there is I don't mean to sound as demeaning as this, but there is sort of a quantity over quality thing. Not to say the quality is bad, but the thing we've talked about is one of the reasons they do have groups of people doing it is they are the manga process is not as meant to be a singular representation of an artist's work. It really is meant to be all things towards the product itself.
And sometimes it is, don't at me about all the, like, guy who makes One Piece, guy who makes Dragon Ball, like, but at this point, even Dragon Ball Super is made by a team. Akira Toriyama, like, helps supervise and stuff, but he's not doing everything anymore.
Just the way this is made, it kind of has to be, right? I mean, otherwise you just wouldn't be, one person couldn't produce this amount of content like this. It would be, it's at least not at any kind of publishable quality.
Well, they can, but sometimes that leads to, like, indefinite delays in the way we've seen with like One Piece and sometimes with like Naruto back in the day, where it's
we've seen
you would go like months at a time without releases.
And we've seen that even in American superhero comics where people get behind, and it does get frustrating.
Speaking of Americans, we do have a few additional credits on this book. We've got Tom Orzechowski doing the letters.
Oars. It's oars, baby.
Doing the strange, like, triple translation, because we have the original script from George Lucas that was translated to Japanese, and then Orzechowski translating it back to English.
Crazy, man. What a process that would be. I would love to talk to, somebody who we know who does that is Diana Schutz. And I think we talked to her a little bit about that
true.
when she was
does
on
that for, like, Black Sad.
Yeah, she does a lot of the French and European comics that way, and just what that process is like is fascinating.
Totally.
So,
and we've got David Land as our editor, and we've got Adam Warren back on the art for our cover.
yes.
And
Yeesh.
yeah, we are in number 2. We talked last time briefly at the end of the episode about kind of the pacing of breaking up the original Star Wars movie, and I think this book has done a fantastic job of finding the act breaks in Star Wars. Because last time we ended with Luke finding Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru dead, the implied interrogation and torture of Princess Leia aboard the Death Star, and like kind of going into our valley of darkness and the hero's journey at their darkest moments.
Yeah, that was a great place to end it on, and it sort of involved like the combining of a couple things, like really making it clear that the Princess Leia interrogation and the Luke's discovery of his dead parental figures are happening simultaneously, is a really smart way to go like, okay, here's where in the trajectory of the story, also not introducing Han Solo, which we'll talk about this cover in just a second, allows it to really just be that, so we're not overcomplicating, because I think we've talked about that too, that some of them have been like, we gotta get Han Solo in there, so we're gonna kind of fudge this. When we one of our big complaints about the '97 special edition adaptation was it felt like they were really going pretty slow early, and then had to speed up down the the opposite. They sped through a lot, and then they had to really slow down, so you get like that trench run goes on forever.
Yeah, and to the point where like the back 2 issues split up the trench run. That's insane.
Right, that's the thing where it's almost like it just didn't feel very well thought out. It felt like they were just sort of doing it all together, and then it's like when you start to write happy birth, and then the day starts to drift off because you haven't measured for how much a letter is taking up space. That's what it felt like.
Obviously, this book has the added benefit of having a much larger page count, so they already have
no question.
An advantage where that's concerned.
Yes. No, there's a lot working in this book's favor. Like we talked about, the thing that it is, just by going to manga, the fact that forces you to create, harder, more unique takes on the character design automatically makes it more interesting, because all of a sudden the comparison to the movie is more about echoing it than trying to make it photorealistic.
Well, let's get to the cover, and we can get right to one of those interpretations in the form of here's Han Solo and Chewie.
And Han is swaggering, baby. Look at that swagger.
And this is Adam Warren, so this isn't exactly the art we'll be getting in the book.
And we've talked about
approximation.
It is, and we've talked about he's leaning, as I said last time, more manga than manga with these in a lot of ways. Like it is. The book is a manga, but it's almost just like, but this is the Americanized manga where it's like, this is an American's view of a Japanese art form.
I really like this design of Han Solo because I think it leans on the thing that you can maybe kind of lose at face value with Harrison Ford, and that's how much of a scoundrel this guy is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just the design elements of them make him look a little bit more threatening, a little bit more like he's got a scheme in mind.
I think some of that is just the relationship we've built with Harrison Ford over the years. That going back, that's just kind of go like, I just love this guy, man. Maybe that's just me. I'm on the record as being somewhat of a Ford fan.
I have specific panels to point that out, and later on as well. But we also get our Chewie design here, which is
I like
actually,
the Chewie.
I don't think the one on the cover is representative of what we get in the book, though.
No, I do agree with that. Though I do like the design, and some of that is just I despise the Chewie design in the 70s comics. So I think everything feels refreshing. But both of these on the cover have that sort of cartoony vibe where it's like, you're really simplifying the even just what a person in general looks like, that like little things echo these characters in my mind. And so I think by doing that, actually, in some ways, I think we talked about this last week a little bit too, you can somehow, in some ways, get to the core of characters much easier because you have to quickly establish them. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about with the scoundrel nature of this too. The way his hair is, the way that he just has a line of a smirk of a mouth, you know? Mm-hmm. Even just the pose. I like the he's got the thumb and the belt in his hand, sort of in a very gunslingery pose, just hanging over his blaster.
It's something
very
you see
Western-y.
a lot in anime and manga, but like there is this weird trope of people with lines that represent hair on the back of their hands and knuckles are usually a little bit mistrustworthy.
That is interesting. Yeah, it adds a grittiness to them or something like that, right? I don't know. There is just something about, which is weird because it's not really something you do control, but it does feel unkempt. It's like a representation of like, oh, he's a grittier guy. I think it's meant to represent hair, but it kind of adds like, oh, he's got dirty hands in some ways. It's you know, that is something I like about this whole style is little things can indicate a lot about a character. That's just not just in manga, but in cartooning in general.
Yeah.
And I love all but then as we've talked about, sort of continuing in the background thing, these very much film accurate renderings of the Cantina aliens.
We'll get into the Cantina scene later in this issue, and I love how lavishly they paint the Cantina sequence in terms of how much we get in background. And some of the, let us say, medium additions in terms of just like, okay, this is a manga. There's gonna be some skimpy alien ladies in this cantina that weren't there in the movie.
If there weren't, we'd want our money back. I'm just saying.
We'll blaze through a few pages here so we can get through the
because it's the introduction is the same as last time. There's the same panel of R2 and 3PO to tell you about how they did the adaptation. It's the same Japanese characters to English of the Star Wars logo and the New Hope title.
But they've also mirrored the panel layouts, so as opposed to the original manga, where you'd be reading it from right to left, they flipped it so that you can read it more traditionally in English from left to right, which, again, I have my own personal issues with in terms of, like, changing the artist's intention, but I think for a mass market English reading audience,
I think
probably a good way to go.
Well, and I think when it's something like Star Wars that is going to get to a bigger American audience, that makes more sense than when it is an original thing, right? Like,
right.
Anyway, we start with, as always, good Lord, 3PO burning Jawa bodies.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We get our big splash page of
which is
the Star Wars logo here. What do you think of the character bits in the Star Wars logo here of like scenes that aren't even going to appear in this book? Because this is a thing in like anime and manga in terms of just like an opening will give you like tidbits of something that may not even happen for like hours of runtime or reading time.
I like everything except for that W with the Han and Chewie designs with the big open mouths. Number one, it looks like Han has fangs, and Chewie is in a full-on kids cartoon.
Oh, we'll get to kids cartoon Chewie. He's all over this book later.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you know, they're in general, I really like what they're doing, but there are bits of, and I recognize, as we've talked about, some of that is just the comedy translation between cultures on that stuff. But that is something where it's just like, well, that's a bit broad, isn't it?
Look. Chewie may be like listing Totoro word throughout this book, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, he's definitely on his way there. Oh yeah, so once again though, the burning of Jawa bodies. Let's talk about it.
Yes, let's talk about a fact that is never really addressed in the movie, and that is that 3PO is shoveling Jawa bodies into fire.
And Obi-Wan is just kind of staring off in the distance, almost as if he's going to turn back and go, "That's right, throw another one on the pile, top it off."
Mm-hmm.
Move those bodies faster, boy.
I do love the opening shot, I guess.
Yeah.
It just starts with, remember, we're on Tatooine. It's big and empty and desolate, and this fire would stand out for miles.
It's great. It's very evocative. It is very dark. And then we go to the next panel, and the very simply, once again, you can talk about just what you can do with the simple lines of this head down, traumatized Luke getting out of the land speeder.
Something I think this adaptation does a lot better than maybe even the movie is give you a sense of how busted up Luke is about this whole situation.
Well, because it does something, and it's something I wish the other adaptations had played with. By turning into panels, there can kind of almost be an elongating of a sequence. You can live in a specific beat a little bit longer than a movie that's in motion can really even do. And so I do think you see that here. And 3PO briefly stops burning some Jawa bodies. Is that Jawa I smell?
I like how we rest on Obi-Wan's face after Luke says, "I want to become a Jedi like my father."
Yeah.
Because again, this adaptation has the retrospective look of just like, but your father became something monstrous.
Right. That even George Lucas didn't know, and I don't care what he says when he made that first movie. I don't care. And if you want to believe that he had the whole thing planned out, I'm not going to shatter that illusion, except for I am, because there's tons of sources and documents that indicate he had no idea where the fuck any of this was going.
Yeah. We get this big empty shot of Tatooine again, and
always
then
great.
We get an even bigger intro to Mos Eisley here.
Well, it really portrays the vastness of Tatooine, right? That, like, Mos Eisley isn't, like, down the street. It's way across the planet, you know? It's a long journey there.
This issue is when we start getting into things that were clearly part of a promotional push in the special edition adaptation, whereas here they feel a bit more organic, and that is some of the special edition additions are included in this adaptation.
They are, yeah, and I think because you're already translating this whole world into this format and this art style, everything is already being retranslated. So one of the big things that the special edition stuff does is it's just so juxtapositional. You're looking at footage done in the 70s versus footage made in the 90s and then updated over the years, right? So there's always a thing about, like, well, that CGI creature doesn't fit no matter what. Whereas here, if everything is already being retranslated, then it all comes in of a piece.
But we don't... Something that we harped on in the special edition adaptation is the needless use of transposing those new special edition scenes into the comic, in a comic that felt like it was already, like, abbreviating the book.
But making a point to, if you're going to cut this, but going like, well, we got to include the special edition additions. It's right. Like really putting emphasis, doing a full page of those Jawas falling off of that huge creature. Do you know the name of that thing? It's not a bantha. It's a big.
My first instinct is to say Ronto, but I don't know if that's right.
I have heard that. I know that is a creature in Star Wars, so that would make sense. But yeah, like we devoting a whole page to that no one in their right mind would if that was always there. But it's just like, well, no, we have to put that in because that's a big thing.
Yep,
and
Ronto,
I remember that. There you go. That makes sense. And here we just get, when they pull into Mos Eisley here, we just get these sort of like wavy legs of a thing in motion passing by them.
Yeah, no, I think this does a good job of abbreviating the Mos Eisley intro sequence that we get in the special edition by just like having this slow push in from the wide exterior to like really giving us a sense that this is a broad, sprawling hive of scum and villainy that we're entering.
Yes.
While not necessarily wasting any panels on extraneous characters or detail.
Right, exactly. It doesn't feel like it's just like, hey, we're doing the stuff, man.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but it's there. It's clearly looking. Its source material is the special edition specifically.
Yes, but we do get our you don't need to see our identification sequence here. I really do love.
Which somebody, of course, that was that the '97 version that just didn't include this?
Yeah, we just like there's dialogue that indicated that it happened.
Amazing. It's not an iconic moment in film history by any stretch of the imagination. What are you talking about?
I love the little rascally look that Obi-Wan's got when he's waving his hand. Like,
he's such a scamp. Well, I do. I mean, I think that's key. In like that is one of the things we like about Obi-Wan is even though he is so beaten down by the world, there is always a part of this guy that digs being a Jedi. It's not. There's been burdens put on him, but there's always a guy that I've always gotten the sense of Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's like, this is pretty fucking cool, though. Like that I can do this.
I can move things with my mind, and it's pretty cool.
And even that's even in the case in the older Guinness interpretation, it's just like that's right. Like there is the old wizard, the Gandalf sort of thing, where it's like, oh, you are a little bit of a scamp, aren't you? It's the thing people love Obi-Wan's bitchiness, right? Like it is that thing where it's just like
and Ewan McGregor's the one who made him catty.
Yeah. I mean, he has the great catty hello there when he drops in on it. That's just the best.
We get Luke's reaction is a little bit overblown again here in the manga version. It's just like how
a little bit overblown. Oh, what?
Yeah, he's a bit of a double take.
Yeah, it's very much what I think of as a manga or anime. That reaction in a Speed Racer cartoon would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
but we very quickly make it to the cantina.
Yep.
And boy,
that's where we want to go.
It's what I want to see, because if there's something I want to see done in like lavish manga detail, it is the iconic scene where we just get a sense of how deep and weird the Star Wars universe is going to become.
The cantina sequence is kind of made for manga in a lot of ways, right? Like it is something I think of large groups of people in bazaars. I mean, you see that in something like Akira, right, and stuff like that. Just sort of these. There are so many of the iconic manga or anime stories are set in these broadly populated weird future or space worlds. Cowboy Bebop, obviously, as well.
I think one of the best examples of that, and one of the anime examples I point to as to like that's had the broadest crossover, is Spirited Away, right?
Sure.
And one of the most like indelibly enchanting bits of that movie is the bathhouse sequence where you just get this plethora of all these different weird creatures and spirits coming in through the bathhouse, and you can watch that movie 100 times and you're always finding new little bits and details in the background.
There's a denseness and a richness to the world that these things take place in. As we talked about, that's one of the reasons why having sort of the studio effect often, the studio, work ethic or whatever allows you to create these fully realized worlds that we've been talking about in this too. So backgrounds get as much attention as foregrounds because you have people who can specifically work on backgrounds.
Right. And so in this first panel of the cantina, there are a couple familiar faces, but there's a lot of other weirder stuff happening. There's this little blob guy down on the floor that's got all these eyeballs sticking out of him.
Yeah, that is a weird
Star Fox over on the far left side here.
Yeah. Nice to see him getting some more work.
Yeah, I love to see it. Man, why haven't they made an animated Star Fox movie? That seems like such a layup.
A friend of the show, Michael Listman, and I, studios, we have a very detailed pitch for one. Like we came up with a really serious outline for one that we are willing to pitch any point. Because basically us just being bored and going, it's just sitting there. It is just sitting there. Yeah. So I would love to see that. Call us anytime. We're ready to go.
We get to the next page. We get our bartender saying, "Hey, we don't serve their kind here,"
and he is furious in this. Not a lot of subtlety in manga, or there can frequently be a lack of subtlety. And this guy is like, "Hey, asshole." Yeah, you.
I really like the use of shading in this, where Luke is standing out as like the one person with the whites, where everyone else is cast in grays and blacks.
Talk about things you can do in a comic book that you can't do in a film. That stuff is very, very good. And also just the the kind of anime nature of him, the big eyes, makes him, not only is he shaded differently, but he's literally wide-eyed. He seems like this innocent child in this hive of scum and villainy. You've got the sexy twins of,
I don't remember them in the original Cantina sequence.
I don't either. This feels like a 60s Star Trek thing where Shatner should roll up on these two. Hi, ladies, Jim Kirk.
We've got Figure and Dan and the Modal Nodes playing their jizz music off to the side.
Of course. You've got to. I
love the little weird alien that's like a tube with teeth on the end, which is totally a thing in the original Cantina sequence, but here they've got him wearing a jaunty bandana.
That is funny. Yeah, I do like that. And so just once again, just that we get a whole page of basically Luke looking around going like, this is pretty weird, man. And you really get that sense because it's just like, I've seen like 8 people in my entire life. And now I'm seeing a whole range of bizarre creatures around me.
Yeah, and even going into the next page, we start with the top half of that page, and that expression that Luke has in the fourth panel here in the middle totally reads as like a kid who was totally overwhelmed by the setting he finds himself in.
And here come our pals.
Yeah, here's Ponda Baba, and here comes Dr. Evazan. Let us not forget Ponda Baba is the weird-looking tarantula guy, and Dr. Evazan is the weird scrunch-faced guy who's got a death sentence in 12 systems.
And what is his doctorate in again?
Torture, mostly.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
His character is actually weirdly expanded upon in the Dr. Aphra comics a lot.
This is true, actually, yeah.
I believe he's like a rogue surgeon is his whole deal.
That kind of adds up. This does feel like a guy doing back alley surgeries.
Yeah, it's like if you need a new spleen on the DL, Dr. Evazan's the guy.
Come to my clinic, Yeah.
Yeah. His clinic involves a tarp and a look at the end of the alley.
Yeah, which is Ponda Baba. Right?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, but of course, immediately he doesn't like you. I mean, this guy's voice is so ingrained in my head. I don't like you either. Anyway, we just came from the movie Rogue One, which is now canon. It's always crazy to me. I definitely had that moment in the theater. I was like, hey, and then I went, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but okay.
Look, they were on their way off that planet, thankfully, because it did blow up hours
thankfully.
After they
I
show
wouldn't
up.
want anything bad to happen to these lovely gentlemen. We're wanted men. I have a death sentence on 12 systems. Little do I, what I'm not telling you is actually for failed alimony payments, but...
Yeah, Dr. Evazan also has kids in 12 systems.
Yeah. Oh, we're still waiting on the test results, actually. I'm contesting a couple of those. And then here comes Obi-Wan just as a badass. This is one of the most badass Obi-Wan moments in the whole franchise anyway.
Oh, totally. And the way this comic plays up this moment is one of my favorite things in this issue, because we have Obi-Wan coming in with his classic this little one's not worth it, here, come let me get you something. They emphasize a line that is actually in the movie but is sort of overplayed by just how quick everything's moving in that
but
scene.
Instead it's
and
this
that is the
massive
bartender shouting no blasters.
Yeah, well, because there's been a lot of murder in this bar. Come on, man.
And there will be more yet.
I don't need to give another police statement. All right.
But
there
are no cops in Mos Eisley. Come on.
Well, it's a couple of stormtroopers rolling in, going, "What's going on in here?"
Sure.
But this last panel of Obi-Wan with just the speed lines and whiz of the light of the lightsaber is so good. It's such an old samurai kind of imagery. One of the only mangas I've read extensively is The Lone Wolf and Cub, which has this sort of, once again, the samurai imagery of it.
Yeah, you want to talk about samurai imagery, though. Let's go to this next page with the double page spread here.
God damn.
It's just Obi-Wan going full Zatoichi, swinging the sword, having moved through 2 guys. There's speed lines going. The sword is drawing. It's got the slight curve to it. His hand down by his hip, where a sheath is not.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, but it's the classic pose, right?
It is the pose. It is the pose. You that's not immediately what your eye is drawn to. It's just the pose is right. It's so cool, and just the wham of the lightsaber.
The look on the two of their faces was just like, wait, what's happening now?
Yeah, it really does imply this sudden burst of violence that is the case here. And then yes, the look on Luke's face as he looks down, as he not even looks down in this, because in the movie it just. You see the arm on the ground. Here we're seeing it in midair coming off of the guy.
And we're seeing Dr. Evazan's gun being destroyed in the same stroke.
Yeah. And everyone gasping, and just one of the most badass images ever of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
It's so good.
It's just like, just another
John, this comic is really good.
It's really good. It does everything we've been waiting for one of these adaptations to do. But just the way his expression and his pose is just like, just another day.
Mm-hmm. You
this
expect him to say, like, Jedi business, move along.
Yeah. And then he just picks up Luke and it's like, all right, let's get the fuck out of here. Or actually, we're going to talk
to... The immediate transition back to just like, oh, well, and this is Chewbacca. He can help us.
I mean, and that is portrayed very, in Guinness's performance in the movie. This just, once again, it allows it to stretch it out. But all those beats are there in the movie, which is great. All right, here we get to Chewie. Interesting design on him. Right off the bat, much better fur.
I think this Chewie actually looks like Chewie. I think this is the best Chewie we've seen so far.
I think this first image of his face is a little weird, but they're giving him more,
his facial structure looks right. He's got hair in all the right places.
Well, that's the thing. He does not have the luxurious flowing locks of the 70s comic. My good lord.
He is no longer Sasquatch from Alpha Flight. No.
Good God, man. That's the worst design in that comic. Man. So anyway, yeah, this is Chewbacca. He's first mate on a ship that might suit our needs.
I like this little addition here on the bottom of this page where we have Evazan and Ponda Baba actually being the ones to inform the stormtroopers outside.
That makes sense. Hey,
yeah,
man.
Totally.
You cut off my friend's arm, man. It was awful. And then here we get, the introduction of Han Solo. First just with the shadowy hand, and then the big reveal of like, yeah, I'm the coolest guy ever.
Fast ship. You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon?
Yeah, iconic, of course. And yeah, it's great. All the poses on this, all the facial expressions definitely tell you. Yeah, you talk about like the thing when you're talking about the hair in his hands, the shadows around his eyes as his hair is falling here as they're talking. Once again, as opposed to the cherubic face we've talked about of Luke Skywalker, definitely implies that like, he may not be a lot older, but he's just lived life, man. There's a darkness around this guy in general. He's seen shit. He's done shit.
I like this next page where we get the Han leaning in moment. We get the shadows around his eyes with that smirk. And the heightening of his like heated interaction with Luke about like, we could buy our own ship for that. Yeah, but who's going to fly it, kid? You?
I do think he's a little infuriated at that, maybe. Han, I feel like, is a little cooler headed in my interpretation. But once again, that's just getting to everything is a little bit more exaggerated in this.
Right, exactly. To the point where you mentioned earlier the like thing with Han's mouth where it looks like he has a fang or something going on. That can be a thing you see in manga and anime a lot, is when like someone's like really heightening their emotions and they're like feeling the evil rise in them or hate or some kind of negative emotion. Like giving them fangs of some kind or another is something you'll see crop up every once in a while.
Right. Okay. I mean, I follow. And like I said, none of these are all very minor quibbles, especially compared to, because I generally like what they're doing. I do really like when we go to this next panel and still just the like, that Obi-Wan is just like, all right, you boys, knock it off now. Come on, everybody. Obi-Wan in dad mode is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we get the great moment of when the stormtroopers walk by and Han and Chewie are like, what's up?
I love the middle panel here that is just Luke and Obi-Wan reacting to the stormtroopers showing up. Luke is getting all abashed and like lowering himself, whereas Obi-Wan's just like, oh right, these assholes.
Oh, I know these jackasses. And then the Han Solo like, you gonna make a deal out of this? And Chewie's like, sup.
I love that Han pose so much. When
It's
he's staring
great.
down the stormtroopers.
It is sort of him like prom officer.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's what I'm talking about with like, that's a cool Han Solo. We go to the next page. Looks like he's got a bit of an elf ear here to me.
Yeah, and that might just be like the way the hair falls or like
Yeah.
a penciling issue. But he has like slightly impish ears, I would say, from a lot of angles. I think that just adds to the kind of like angular like impishness of him.
Well, and I do love the eyebrows on him, the very slanted, dark, pointed. So he's always kind of doing it like, yeah. You know, once again, always sort of scheming. Let's get to Luke's getting Priscilla's speeder, and now let's get to Greedo.
Oh yeah, I love the Greedo bit in this book. We don't have Greedo speaking Huttese; we just have him speaking English. I think that's probably easier.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't do the thing, and this just may be that manga doesn't do this, but like probably in a Western comic, you would do the brackets and put the dot,
Right.
the little note that it is in Huttese.
Translated.
But we've also seen the movie and just know. So for ease's sake here, So Greedo comes over, being his typical jackass self.
I love the interaction here where the book actually serves to highlight that Han puts his feet up on the table here when he's talking to Greedo expressly to like get his gun in a position where he can shoot him.
And this kind of lands where now the current cut of Star Wars has kind of ultimately landed, which is like they both shoot at the same time.
Kind of, though this manages to avoid the weird neck jerk of Han dodging the blaster bolt.
Always the thing that has never worked ever. But here, because I love the drawing of it. It feels like Han is like a half second ahead on pulling the trigger, right? And so it's like by the time Greedo has the muscle has actually compressed on the trigger, he's already dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is pretty cool.
I like giving Greedo actual expressions in this book with this middle panel where Greedo is just like, I'm looking forward to killing you.
Because he's not a McClunky! But because it's not a rubber mask.
Yeah, exactly.
And then his body, the way they do this with the speed lines and the flop, this guy is dead with a capital D. And I love it.
And just the expression on Han's face when he chucks the bartender the coin, being like, sorry about the mess.
And and the total Mario character of the barkeep.
Yeah, I like his little mustache.
Although, you know what I like about it is I really like the onomatopoeia of snatch when he grabs the coin. Mm-hmm. That's very fun to me.
That last panel, I actually marveled at it for a little while. Because like, wow, it's implying a lot with a couple of speed lines and some sound effects, and I know exactly what it's trying to convey.
Yeah, like I said, something I do really respect about the manga form is what it can do. It does a lot with a little. There's a real minimalism to it that conveys so much. And it in the same way like classic cartooning is. You look at like Eisner and stuff like that, right? Like in some ways, sometimes being very simple can actually convey a ton. Because especially we have grown up in such a time of comic books. Neil Adams, Frank Miller, sort of all post that stuff where it's like detail has really become the mark of art quality. But I have a lot of respect for just sort of classical cartooning, which is what I really think that is right there.
Sure, no, and I think that is where the draw to art styles inspired by manga or directly like a part of the manga ecosystem comes from, because for every like who is the artist on Kingdom Come?
Alex Ross.
For every Alex Ross that's like hyper detailed to the point where like you see wrinkles on clothing.
Oh, where you're almost like, is this a photograph? Yeah.
That has its own appeal, but there is something like more real than real that you can get in those classic cartooning ways, and
Sure.
like how people can deform and it can express emotion in kind of greater effect in that style.
Absolutely. And it's the great thing about, I think, where we are in comics now is that you can get all of that,
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of detail, we get our cut back over to the Death Star where we've got Tarkin and Vader, and God, Vader just looks so cool in this book.
Once again, I do love the way, and it reminds me of sort of the way like Sienkiewicz does like Kingpin and stuff, where his body just becomes a black hole.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just disappears into just this black figure. He's a head on top of this never-ending darkness. And then, just how douchey every Tarkin expression is. He's always...
And again, we've talked about how, like, this is not a one-to-one for Cushing. They're not even really trying, necessarily, which I respect.
No, and it is similar with Guinness, right? Where it's sort of like, they're like getting to something beneath the performance more than trying to actually make their, like... face look exact or anything like that. And but also he, similar to Han, always kind of having that like mischievous smirk, this guy always has this like sociopathic delight in like, we're about to kill a whole bunch of people.
Set course for Alderaan. Nothing bad will happen there.
Yeah. I think it's time we demonstrated the full power of this station. Yeah, it is just like, I'm about to commit genocide at a level never before seen, and I am loving it.
We cut back to Tatooine on this page. So
by the way, this is also something that this is done so much better than, and I'm just going to keep bashing on it because it's our show. We can do whatever the hell we want. But like the cross-cutting of stuff is so much better thought out in this.
Yeah, it's got actual like pacing and... Like,
it was so clumsy. That was something we really complained about in that 97 special edition adaptation, was we're just like, why have we cut away to this and then cut back? Here, I never have any of that questioning. The flow of this is so natural and so propulsive.
Yeah, like, look, we get this whole sequence here on this double-page spread of like, uh-oh, the Empire's coming. And then we cut back to Tatooine where, uh-oh, the Empire's coming. It's thematic.
Yes. And there are things like that where it's like, I don't even know off the top of my head if these are the cuts that are in the movie, but they so make sense in this. It's not about the direct translation. It is about telling the same story,
Yeah, exactly.
And what works for that. So so we're back on Tatooine. We're selling the speeder. There's a mysterious figure watching them.
Yeah, Goggles Longnose guy. He has a name. I've completely forgotten what it is.
He just said his name. His first name Goggles, last name Longnose. Goggles Longnose. of the Tatooine Longnoses.
And here we get our biggest, usually considered the most egregious addition to A New Hope.
That's pretty cool here. I mean,
somebody shouting "Solo."
It's still extraneous, like just from an objective storytelling standpoint. But I will say the only thing about it is like you want to see what Manga Jabba looks like.
And boy, do you.
And also the way they hide him. They literally hide him behind word bubbles at one point here, which is cool.
Yeah, this whole first page, you don't actually see what Jabba looks like. And they're having this whole exchange about like, look, I've got a new charter. It's not good for business. You dumped my stash. And then it is only on this next double-page spread that we get this huge reveal of Jabba the Hutt as he is compared to other characters around him.
Once again, it's like the Vader thing where it's like, this is way bigger than he is in the movie. Especially the Jabba that they inserted in New Hope is considerably smaller than the one we see in Return of the Jedi. Yeah. But here he's just this blob of a being. He's just so gross, so huge. And it really works when you have the comparison to Han Solo, who's just like, yeah, whatever, you fucking slug thing.
But this scene doesn't include the thing in the movie where he's like actively stepping on Jabba in a sequence that in the movie, like with what we know about Jabba the Hutt, Solo would be a dead man if he did that.
Yeah, Solo wouldn't go that far. Because the whole thing, and it's always the case, Solo's always fronting, right? Han Solo is always a guy who is acting much more confident and cool-headed than he really is. And so that's what it is. So it's a front. So him waving him off and not looking at him and stuff like that. But yeah, also, much like the dodging of it looks like shit when he steps on him, too. It doesn't look right at all. And that's only because, of course, he wasn't a slug guy. He was just a guy when they shot the scene.
Right, exactly.
It's like a guy in a fur coat. Yeah.
Because they didn't know what Jabba the Hutt was in that movie. Because Lucas didn't know what he was planning to do.
I've heard quite the opposite. But I love this. Love the close-up.
Lets us highlight something that they did include in the special edition, but I think is done much better here and is actually given emphasis.
You're talking about the Fett Man.
I'm talking about the Fett Man. Yeah, we get a whole page devoted to Han and Boba Fett staring each other down.
And it is great because you don't get that because obviously they didn't have that footage of Harrison Ford. So you just have Boba Fett there because like, hey, Boba Fett. But here if that would be awesome in the movie if that was the case, and you're already starting in movie 1 like you're my rival, you're the guy. We have beef between the two of us.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't say it, but their expression is just like Boba Solo. You know?
Yeah, exactly. No,
they're each looking over their shoulder at each other. They're not making direct eye contact.
Yeah, you can imagine, like, okay, Jabba's pulling out of this place. He's got all of his minions in tow, and Boba Fett's the last one in the line, and just like making visor to eye contact.
This is what I imagine every studio meeting that Vin Diesel and The Rock are in looks like. It's just that each of them going.
Yeah, never gonna actually talk to each other because they can't. Their egos won't let them anymore.
Is it fast? Is it the 6th one where they have the conversation entirely looking over each other's shoulders? It's one of my favorite moments ever. It's two men
because they literally weren't on set with each other.
No, they were still on set with each other at that point. They say they've squashed the beef. We'll see. Beefs have been squashed.
Well, if he shows up in X2 or whatever it's called. Fast United, I think, is that next one movie.
Well, they've already announced the next Hobbs movie, so
sure, yeah.
But all right. So anyway, let's go. The beautiful rendering of the spaceport.
Yeah, you get a weird expression from Chewie here. I'm not quite sure what the
what is he reacting to? Yeah, I don't even know. That is a weird moment where he's just like, huh, and then nothing. I don't know. Is he reacting to Goggles Long Nose?
I don't know.
Maybe.
But Goggles Long Nose give us a nice little yabbit on the bottom here.
Beep. And then, oh boy, does the Falcon look cool.
Yeah. Say what you will about the other adaptations. The Falcon never looks this good in any other comic we've read so far.
One of the things that's cool about the Falcon is obviously like the basic shape of it looks cool, but this gets all the details of how real the Falcon always felt. And that was always something about Star Wars, right? Was that everything felt very tactile, and so you get all the rivets and piping and everything here. It just so much more time has been spent on this, where I think a lot of other people kind of shorthand the Falcon because we all know the shape and basic design. So they go, it's the Millennium Falcon. We don't need to go too detailed on this because people can they're kind of putting on you to go like, what it looks like in the movie. Here's the basic shape of it. But here, this is so lovingly put together. You can just stare at each part of it and how, oh yeah, look at that. That's gorgeous.
Right. And obviously, like, in the version we're reading right here, the cockpit's on the wrong side, but that is because the panel layout has been mirrored. Yeah,
correct. It's the same reason why Han's blaster is on his left hip in some places.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, but Han's not left-handed. Oh, right. Yes, and you just have to accept that. That's where you're at. The weirdest thing is when it messes with iconography you're familiar with.
Correct.
Yeah, but that's why they put that thing in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. So we have this exchange between Luke and. About like
it's ever the thing in these that this is a piece of junk to them, when to us it's the coolest fucking thing you've ever seen in your life. And not to keep lording this over, but I have been in the presence of the real thing in the middle of Disneyland, and I mean it was tantamount to like a religious experience. It was there. It was real in a way where you're just like, I knew it. I knew it was out there somewhere, and there it is, in all its glory. It is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in my life. But that's always the thing. That's always kind of the thing in the movies. People go like, "Oh God, what is this piece of crap?"
You came hearing that here further than I thought.
Yeah, exactly. But to me, it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. And then this is great, all this blaster fire and stuff on the next panel.
Yeah, we got the stormtroopers racing in, stop that ship. On the next page after that, we get this whole page of just like them coming under fire, stormtroopers firing, them firing back, getting onto the ship.
Well, that's another thing. Like we all know that moment Han Solo's running up the gangplank into the ship, and he's firing back. But just the wall of blaster fire coming at him in this that is so much bigger than anything that's in the movie, based on both the budgetary restraints of special effects and also just the visual chaos that would be in live action. But here, it's so much more expressionistic, and it's awesome. This is another one that I would want to put up as a print, is Han Solo turning and firing and all the blaster bolts going by him. And the blast him!
We got Han running through the corridors. We got Chewie scrambling at the controls. We got stormtroopers continuing to fire.
All this action is great. It's all so well conveyed.
I love the page following that where we have the split panels of all the different characters having their reaction faces as they're scrambling to get the Millennium Falcon out of the docking bay here.
Very Speed Racer.
Very, very Speed Racer. To the point where everyone has speed lines behind them as they're reacting.
Yeah. Which I will say, that was, as a kid, that was the only thing that, not even knowing what anime was or anything, I just loved Speed Racer and its whole vibe, obviously.
Sure. This is definitely where we start leaning into the Chewie is a lovable cartoon character.
Yeah. That's what he should. That's the sound he should be making.
He's got a Scooby-Doo face going on from here on out, basically.
Absolutely.
And he still looks like Chewie, but just like his eyes are way bigger.
He's a cartoon. He's a cartoon Wookiee. There's no like he's still more recognizable as Chewie than the Chewie in the '70s Marvel book, but he is very much a cartoon sidekick. This is Hanna-Barbera's Chewbacca Adventures.
Yeah, I would watch the shit out of that show.
Oh, of course we would. And then just what a glorious shot of the Falcon taking off.
Everything devoting this widespread
in the world. That is the thing that this does as well, and that I think also, of course, huge benefit of having the larger page count is when they stop for these moments, like a film, to just go, look at this.
This is cool. Isn't this cool?
And because they know that the people reading this think this is cool, so they want them to. You're turning the pages, especially coming off of that big action beat. You're whipping through, going, they're blasting, they're running, and then it's just like, the awe of the Falcon taking off. Though suddenly we go out to the big wide frame, and it's like, there it goes, man.
You can hear that verm sound in the back of your head.
I love that they don't even bother to put in a sound effect because we know what it sounds like. They just like. But just the explosion of energy coming off of the engine, and just like it really, more than anything we've seen, conveys the speed of this thing.
Yeah.
And then of course as we cut inside, and everyone is being hurled to the back of the ship as it takes off.
I like Luke just like grabbing onto the space chessboard there,
and there it goes.
And then the little smile on Obi-Wan's face gets me. The little like cat smile he's got.
Well, because it's sort of just like, we're doing this again. It's like he's a guy. He's getting his groove back. He's back on the adventure. He's back in the game, man.
Mm-hmm.
You love it. You love to see it.
Next page. It's all speed lines, baby. We're all speed lines all the time.
Speed lines everywhere. Speed line. Speed line. Speed line. Yeah, and there they go, and we're taking off. I don't even know. I don't know what to say about it.
Well, it's just that exchange of just like, look, we got to figure this out. We got Star Destroyers coming in. We got TIE Fighters coming in. I love on the following page when they're trying to show off like how maneuverable the Falcon is, and he's got that weird like corkscrew speed lines. I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah, implying the ship spinning and flipping, which, is so much of the coolness of how the mobility of the Falcon and how maneuverable it is. That's the word I was looking for.
Traveling through hyperspace isn't like Dustin Crops boy.
And then when we come to the big Star Destroyer on the next page,
I love the
intimidating
of the Star Destroyers like opening fire and just having their like broadside cannons basically.
Yeah. And all of it, I mean, just once again, it's just it. Like I said, I don't have much to add beyond just the appreciation of how they're displaying this, and you can really feel like the trouble they're in, the overwhelming force that's coming at them. Yeah.
If you're reading along with us on your own way, you can kind of get the sense of what we're talking about, or if you want to join us over on YouTube and read the comic along with us, you can get a sense for this. Like it's that thing we've always struggled with as podcasters who talk about comic books a lot. It's just like at a certain point the art speaks for itself, and
and you just go like, it's pretty cool image of the Millennium Falcon there, man. But I do like all these pages. The thing I like about this whole section is the build up to the raising the stakes, the Star Destroyer, the huge fire, and the building up to we're waiting to get to jump to hyperspeed and or to light speed, and then when we blast off, it's so satisfying with a giant zow.
Yeah.
Which is very Flash Gordon
around us, yeah.
Which I love. The choices on the sound effects are so much better because it's always going to be cheesy. Like you're never gonna. So just like embrace the zap and zow of it, but the way it's glommed in, the way they put it into the art. Like I said, it gives it this very Flash Gordon-y feel, which Lucas would certainly approve of, being that this was all based on his love of Flash Gordon.
Totally, 100%. I love a good sound effect, and to lean into the just like, look, sometimes stuff just sounds like a vree or a zow.
Yeah.
Not everything's a crack-a-thoom. I love a good crack-a-thoom.
Oh, a crack-a-thoom. I mean, that is the sound of Thor to me. But
sure.
But I think that's the other thing too, is sometimes I think they're overthinking the sound effects in the 70s book, where they're going like, no, it's like a crow, kupow, zipow, something like that. It's like, no, it's just like a zap.
Sometimes you can just write zap. Yep.
Yeah, it really is sort of the thing where it's almost just like, oh, well, we don't want to just put zap or blast or pow or something like that. It's like, no, but yeah, you kind of just need, that's all you need. So here they take off.
All right, so here is where we get into, we talked last issue about the addition of that brief sequence that this book added where we saw the stormtroopers rolling up on the Jawas.
Yeah.
This does a similar thing on a much more devastating level.
Dude, this is the kind of thing where it's like, if I think Lucas had the ability, I think he would have put this in here, because it is something Force Awakens does that I think is kind of cool. Yeah. And I am one to ever compliment J.J. Abrams' Star Wars, but
we cut here to people reacting on a city street somewhere, looking up at a new star appearing in the sky.
Actually, I'll just back it up to Rogue One does this very well, when you see the Death Star appear in the sky, and it's foreboding, and you're like, what the fuck?
And because that's what this is we have cut to a shot of the point of view of Alderaan as the Death Star appears in its orbit.
Of anything in this, it is the thing I most wish was actually in the movie, because it really makes it clear what the movie does make clear, but this really makes it visceral. The monstrousness of what they're about to do, the pure evil of the obliteration of an entire planet, and the terror of the people there. I mean, it's really Guinness who has to sell that to us with it's like a million souls were crying out and then was suddenly silent. That whole thing. That's that. And luckily you have one of the greatest actors who ever lived saying that. Hot take, Guinness, pretty good actor.
Not bad.
Pretty good. Yeah, not bad. And then when you see, and it's just the forced perspective of it. But the 2-panel spread that is the huge Death Star, and then because it's at a distance, the tiny little planet. Yeah. And you're like, oh shit, Doom is coming. Like, it's so good.
It's so good.
Yeah. Love it.
When we get back inside the Death Star, we're back with Princess Leia and Tarkin. They have their exchange here. Tarkin, of course, just being such an asshole here. We get a lot more emotionality out of Leia in this sequence than I think Carrie Fisher delivered in the movie, and I think that is more of a heightening of the manga thing here.
Yes, absolutely. Because I do think the way Carrie Fisher plays it in the movie is much like we were talking about with Han, trying to sort of be like, well, I'm not scared of you. Fuck you, man. Like, something I want to say, they haven't the likeness we've talked about, that they don't go hard on Cushing. They have really captured the physicality, the Nazi-esque rigidness that he plays in his Tarkin in the movie, that he's ever ramrod straight spine, arms behind him. You never see extreme gestures from Tarkin. He's always just this controlled, polished soldier.
Yeah, and I think this comic definitely captures that a lot.
Yeah. Which is it's the banality of evil that I love in Tarkin.
We have this exchange here where he's like, "Look, you got to name a target, or else I'm going to blow up Alderaan. Where's the rebel base?"
They do make sure to include my favorite Tarkin line, which is "charming to the last."
Finally, we have Leia saying Dantooine. They're on Dantooine, and then that again, Cushing just crushes this line. But it's like, there, you see, Lord Vader, she can be reasonable. Continue with the operation. You may file when ready.
And just the hand, the little like, go ahead, yeah. Another hot take: Peter Cushing, very good actor. I mean, just to step out of the comic a little bit for a moment, I don't know if that's appreciated. Not just those guys were always going to deliver, but how smart it was of Lucas to go like, if I'm going to have a bunch of like young hot unknowns in these parts, but I'm just going to in key places put truly amazing, like classically trained dudes who will ground this whole thing. And that is still something I think a lot of sci-fi does, where it's like when Patrick Stewart's talking about Romulans, suddenly you're going like, well, shit, we gotta do something about these like it does something to really ground what could be very silly. And you see this a lot in bad sci-fi, and you see this particularly in movies following Star Wars, where they're trying to get at Star Wars, and you're like, well, why are they silly? And it's not just that like the special effects are bad; it's just like, well, because no one's taking this seriously.
Well, and even if the actors are taking it seriously, very few of them are capable of delivering these objectively silly lines with the amount of gravitas that people like Cushing and.
Well, and
other
Guinness,
people can,
yeah, particularly Cushing. Obviously, that was his whole career.
Yeah,
right. He spent an entire career talking about silly shit. And I don't know if
when
you
you
go
play
over
Abraham Van Helsing as many times as he did.
Yes. One the thing that's cool about Cushing, and one of the reasons why we love him so much over on Meet the Monsters, and I don't know if we've actually announced it. I guess I'll announce it here. We're doing our Vincent Price series right now. When we finish Vincent Price, we will be doing our Peter Cushing miniseries.
Get to do all of his Sherlocks.
Yes, all the stuff that basically isn't the Draculas and Frankensteins.
Nice.
But one of the things is, as we've also come to learn about that biography, that guy was a huge fucking nerd. That dude loved comics and sci-fi, and so he loved doing that shit. So when he takes it seriously, it's not out of like whatever this pays the bills. He loved genre shit. So that just always endears me more to him. But he also made it clear, in the shots where you couldn't see his boots, he had his nice comfy slippers on while making Star Wars. So don't worry, they took nice care of him. And then yes, also the incredibly evil. You're far too trusting.
We get this good shot of Tarkin being just evil as all get out on this next page.
Just that, like, millions of people are about to die, and it's gonna rule. And
something I noticed about the interpretation of Tarkin here, as opposed to like a lot of the other characters in the book who have those like big anime eyes, Tarkin's are much smaller. His pupils are like really tiny and dilated all of the time.
It's how it's how the Joker's often drawn. His eyes are frequently done like that too. It is definitely, it reads as evil, it reads as psychosis, but also in that it's all just the lines and wrinkles and smirks. It's never a cackling madman. It's just a like, watch this.
Yeah. And watch this we do. This next couple of
pages because this is
the
also
triumph
something
of this issue.
Well, the firing of the Death Star is so iconic. And we've talked about the fact that this has been left out of, I believe, both of the other adaptations, wasn't it? The full, like, the way you see it, because that's also something I love about when people talk about Star Wars feeling so real and so grounded. This is a key aspect of that. It's like, if this is a giant planet-killing super weapon, it's not just going to fire. There's going to be a buildup. It has to charge. It has to fire this beam through a thing into another thing. You're pulling levers. The sound, of course, is amazing in the movie. The boom, like that whole thing.
How it just like builds up, how all these different lasers have to meet at a point to make an even bigger laser.
That's the thing. You're like, well, I guess if you had a weapon that destroyed a planet, it would have to kind of function like that. There's stuff like that that's so for a series that is that has magic in it and is so fantastical. I do like the attention to detail in the technological aspects of it. That's very, very cool. And then, boy, when Alderaan, you do get one more shot of the massed people on Alderaan as the beam hits them.
Yeah, you get just this crowd of people before there's this huge flash of white, and you gotta think that the reason the manga version of this specifically shows off a detail like this is just culturally resonating with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right?
Well, they're the only country that have been subject to a nuclear attack.
Exactly.
So,
they're the only country in the world that has been the victims of a weapon of mass destruction, even like how we could even consider something approaching the Death Star.
Right, exactly. And so, I do feel like that's always... You see that in a lot of Japanese art across the board. And we always talk about the original Godzilla movie and stuff like that. But it is interesting when you how it finds its way into stuff. And I've never seen the destruction of Alderaan portrayed like this. The people, the explosion that we go... we go the little planet in the sky, the people on the planet, the destruction, and then we're going out from it, right? So we see the people, we see now we're on the surface of the planet as it's exploding, then we're pulling out and we're seeing it consuming the planet.
The impact shot of the beam hitting Alderaan, this double-page spread here, is such just like a tremendous piece of apocalyptic art.
Well, because you don't ever really see you just see a beam hit Alderaan and it explodes in the movie.
Yeah.
Here we're seeing it actually no, it hits here first, spreads out, and it's burning the whole planet around it. Like, it's a level of horror we don't get from it,
On a smaller scale, we see this level of devastation in Rogue One when the beam hits Jeddah and Scarif to a certain extent.
Well, because that's where we'd never seen it. We've seen it destroy planets, but the idea that it's hyper focused on a place like that, the full force of just I forgot what exactly the thing is. It's at like, was it single turret fire?
A single reactor.
Yeah, it's not all because it's not all the beams coming together, but you just see Jesus Christ. That's how it is. It's like that's one of these attacking it, and it is devastating in that movie and beautifully portrayed. And then the whole thing, and it is the reaction shot of the guy behind Tarkin being like, Jesus Christ, I'm part of the Empire, but fuck, man. And Tarkin's just like, yeah, that worked exactly the way I wanted it to, baby.
Yeah. And we see some tears slipping through Leia's hands as she's like clasping her, and then covering her face.
The sick enjoyment of Tarkin recognizing that and being like, that's right.
Right. Like,
oh man,
teach you a lesson to mess with the Empire.
An amazing 2-page spread, or this isn't a 2-page spread, but just this whole page panel of Tarkin looking over his shoulder at crying Leia, like, not so smart now, are we?
Ugh, it's just
fucking
like
dick.
Ultimate evil and ultimate devastation emotionally from Leia's face.
Absolutely.
It's so good.
And then, of course, we go back out to just the obliterated planet.
Yeah, one last shot of just like mostly white with the black shadow of the Death Star streaking across it. It's so affecting.
And then you talk about the structure of this, we come to the reducing explosion and the way they visually connect this to Obi-Wan feeling it.
Yeah, the next page as we see the settling explosion and then immediately cut to Obi-Wan suffering the shock.
Yeah.
It's very effective panel layout and just like, oh, they're telling a good Star Wars story. Excellent.
And and visual storytelling. Like I said, it's just we're not used to this level of and some of that is, of course, living in the 70s, not known as a great time for the pacing of a comic book. Like, we're still kind of in the era where it's very disposable. So you're not really thinking about okay, here's how the thoughts of a reader are going from page to page.
Right.
Whereas here, this is so well done.
Well, and it does stand in such stark contrast to the special edition adaptation where it's like, no. That was a comic made in the era where you should have known better.
Yeah, and it's so just going but whatever, you saw them, you know how all this fits together. Like it's so cynically made, that comic.
Yeah.
But then I like this moment when we go to the next page and there's sort of just the shared expression between Luke and Obi-Wan, and then Han Solo going like, "Yeah, that's right. I outran those suckers." You almost want him to turn and go, "Who died?" Right?
Yeah. I like the deflated expression here on Han. It's just like, don't everybody thank me at once.
Yeah, good lord, Jesus. All right. Here's the 3D chess thing that I think I believe this was also left out of the 97 adaptation.
Yeah, I like all of Chewie's reaction shots here. Again, it's very much cartoon Chewie, reacting to being beaten by a droid.
You've just got to. I mean, I've just accepted that that's going to be what their Chewie is. They've made him a bigger, cartoony character, and that's fitting into this context. I'm not glomming the live action Chewie onto him.
Sure, but it retroactively works on the more lovable Chewie that we have come to embrace as the series went on.
Oh, totally. I mean, I definitely I like this Chewie more than the other Chewies that have really kind of blown it. I feel like on in any way endearing us to him, because he's all the 70s comic. He's all over the place.
In the 70s comic, have we literally had a cover for him trying to kill every other main character?
I think that's the thing. They really see. I think this scene. The writers and artists of that comic really seized upon the idea that he'll rip your arms off, and it's just like, oh, got it, he's super dangerous. And you're like, yeah, right. That's really not how we as fans view Chewie. Interesting that that's what they've taken it from. This guy, it's like having a wild animal on the ship, you know?
Right. Next page, we get Luke doing some training, him getting hit by the remote here.
Yeah, this is all much more thrilling than it's very casual in the movie.
Yeah, here it's a lot more thrilling, and it ends a lot more thrillingly as well. I love Han's reaction is a little bit more verbose about Luke getting his ass shot.
Once again, a little bit more verbose. He's openly cackling. You dumb fucking kid. Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster at your side. One of my absolute favorite Han Solo lines.
I love the sort of samurai-esque, focus, and they're really leaning into the swordsman aspect of using a lightsaber and connecting with the Force.
Well, this is an interesting thing where, once again, it's like the translation we were talking about, where it's George Lucas being influenced by Japanese history and sort of more realistically pop culture depictions from Japanese works. And now we're seeing that influence on an American movie now being adapted by Japanese people who are reflecting an American version of their own pop culture. And it's this Ouroboros of influence that's very fascinating to see.
Absolutely. So when we get this last page, when he finally hits the remote coming back in, and it is this way more dramatic, whack, as he's bringing the sword down in one clean stroke.
This is another example of having the page space to be able to do this in a longer thing. Is no 22-page issue adaptation of this would ever put this kind of emphasis on this, but this has the time to do it, and once again adds to putting you in the feelings of the scene.
I also like the addition here, then something that we really don't get in the movie, of Han's reaction to Luke actually managing to hit the remote coming at him.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because it's like I call it luck. In the movie, I don't know. I don't read anything from Harrison Ford as being impressed. He's still writing it off in the movie, right? It's still right. Whatever. He just got lucky. Here, they're making it seem like Han's kind of going I think I saw something, and then is writing it off. Harrison Ford seems completely unimpressed, legitimately, through the scene. So that's an interesting. Right. You talk about sort of the additions of whoever the author or authors of this are. Is interesting.
The idea that Han was actually impressed by what happened, but then is immediately fronting again and putting up that veneer of oh, cool, I call it luck.
That's a totally valid read. It's just a thing they've entirely invented, and it works. Totally. It's just those are some of the most interesting things in this, where it's sort of the creative license of the adaptation to go well, this is how I'm choosing to read this, even though that's not expressly made clear in the movie.
And I do like that they've spent the time here to create this moment of genuine connection between Luke and Obi-Wan that is there in the movie on text, but I think you live in it more in this adaptation, which I like.
You definitely do. And let's go back to the scary guys.
Yeah, Scary dies. They find out Dantooine is deserted. She lied to us. She would never betray the rebellion consciously. Tarkin's got his big pouty face on.
Big pouty face, and the pose on Vader is almost just like, I told you, man. I said it. Did you hear when I said that? Because I was right. I told you.
I love the Vader here. Like, just every time they draw Vader in close up, it looks cool.
It really does. The Vader in black and white is really awesome. Always,
right?
Because he is all black. So then you get just the shadings of the light coming off of his helmet. I do think that this, and I think some of that has to do with the black and white and the shading of this. Like, you really get the sense of the metallic nature of his helmet in this interpretation so much better than we've seen. And I mean, of course, he's pretty green or blue, or he's very flatly colored in the 70s book.
Yeah. Well, and this book really also gives you the more intimidating, questioning nature of, like, what even the fuck is Vader?
He's very monstrous, active, like to an inhuman level. Even the way that they're drawing, like the shape of his body doesn't read as a man.
Yeah. Well, because at least in the movie, he's never stock still, so you can still, like, read little fidgeting motions as human. Whereas in this, in the last page where we have him just standing in a room, for all we know, he is as still as a statue, and there is this inhumanity to that.
And the way his cape flows and his body descends into complete darkness, he almost has this, like, specter kind of form when he's near Tarkin.
Totally.
It's really cool. So we come out of light speed.
Double page spread in the wreckage of Alderaan.
Yeah, classic. It ain't here. It's been totally blown away.
Yeah. We get the reactions there. I love just speeding through this a little bit because it is basically the dialogue from the movie. There's a ship out here. It couldn't have followed us. It needs to go towards something. What I really like here is on this next page where we have the emphasis on the "That's no moon" line.
Mm-hmm.
Where we have the Millennium Falcon zooming towards what they think is a small moon, and then just the hard cut in on Obi-Wan's eyes,
the
reaction,
playing the realization of it before he says it, letting us sit in that moment. He's like, "Oh God, it's a space station," and then the cut to the very Nazi clicking of the boots.
If it wasn't clear, everyone, the Empire are space Nazis.
Yes, yeah.
And
here comes
them
Vader.
being like, we've captured a freighter. And like, at this point, the Empire saying we've captured a freighter. Back with our heroes, they're not even aware that they're captured yet, but the Empire already knows that they've got them in their web.
Yeah, this is another thing. I'd have to go back and look at the exact, but the cross-cutting of this, I think, is mostly an invention of this.
Yes,
or at least the specific cuttings of it. It's very cool.
We don't get the Vader-Tarkin interaction until after they've been drawn in by the tractor beam.
Yeah, so I like that, where it's like they're building up this pacing that is really just more modern pacing. It's just even Star Wars was kind of ahead of it. We always talk about the idea that the first movie plays a little slower than you remember it, and that's just because it's a movie from the 70s.
Yeah.
And that movie was lightning pace then. Like, that movie was so... But, like, because 70s movies, it is always a thing I talk about as somebody who's way into, like, classic cinema and stuff. Is like, you've got to put yourself in the right mindset. I kind of understand where people are coming out when they go, old movies are boring. It's like, well, you've got to click in. You've got to, like, vibe with them, right?
Totally.
And Star Wars is, like, the first step in the modern... Jaws, Star Wars, Rocky are kind of the first movies to start having more modern pacing, but they are still of their time. So
yeah, you go back and watch something like even something that is considered a perennial classic, like Sound of Music or like Casablanca. Like those movies, by comparison, feel like sludge.
They drag compared to modern standards, but at the time they were considered rip-roaring, like they were considered lightning. I mean, it's the Bond movies, right? I love the Connery Bond movies, but you're like, he's just walking through this airport for 5 minutes. But in the 60s, people were just going, look how fucking cool this guy, look at him go, man.
Also, they shot that in a real airport? Wow.
Well, there was particularly the Bond movies. There was the travelogue idea of just like Jamaica. No, hold on, don't do anything. I want to look at this ocean, man. Wow.
As a film goer in the Midwest, I've literally never seen an ocean.
Yeah, people actually there's a whole, and I'm sure somebody has whole scholarly essay to be written about how the world was introduced to Americans a lot through those James Bond movies.
Totally. Okay, we get them getting drawn in by the tractor beam. I love the emphasis on what the tractor beam technology looks like in this.
Yeah, that's something we haven't really seen. It's kind of an invisible force, really, in the movie. I also love the close up on the controls of the Falcon trying to get out of there.
Mm-hmm. Chewie got a big cartoon reaction and it's like, oh no. Rolo,
because everybody is kind of cartoonish, but they're all sort of like they're all sort of doing like intense and then Chewie's like Chewie always kind of stands out from the bunch. He just gets the most cartoonified take in this.
We know they're in a tractor beam. It's pulling us in. How are we gonna get out of this? I don't know. R2's having a real bad time.
R2 appears to be on fire and crying.
I mean, that's basically their situation right now.
I like Luke helping 3PO up because he's fallen and he can't get up. He hit
3PO, very turtle-like in that way.
Help! I'm on my back. And the whole frustration of Han punching the thing, going, "There's nothing I can do, man. They got us."
Mm-hmm. There's the whole there's a constant sound effect of this like groan sound effect that it makes every time we approach the Death Star, and it is that like low weird noise that the Death Star makes in that movie that you don't even really clock until they put it in sound effect form.
There is this monstrous nature to it, of this like growling, approaching, evil doer coming at you that is just this force of doom that is the Death Star.
Well, and that's why I want to talk about this next page spread, because if you're not familiar with some of the like manga tropes, this page could be indecipherable to some people.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly the boldest swing for me. In terms
what we've got here is the Death Star, right?
Right.
And like you can see the lines and dots that are more traditionally shown on the Death Star in terms of its like exterior as a sphere. But you've got this like layered artistic flair on it of all of these like dark swirls and shadows and shapes on it. And this is a very like traditional manga flourish, I guess, for just like the presence of evil. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get what they're going for. It's just it's the most actively expressionistic, like in a classic art sense.
Yeah. But you see this sort of like swirl and presentation and like art feature, I guess, a lot in the same way that you'd see like, I don't even know how to compare it to something in American comics really, except for like in the same way that speed lines are a universally accepted like method of showing that something's going real fast or motion is happening. This is like something you see more in manga and Japanese animation that just expresses like, if we need to get across that the thing you're moving towards is bad.
Right. I mean, that's why that's what I'm looking at, is like there's almost this obfuscation of it, right, to the point of I'm being pulled in the tractor beam ever closer to this thing, so it's almost like warping in the perception of it. Right, it's just like you're coming at a thing as it's in motion, and it's kind of creating this like, oh my god, because then it does cut back out to, and what I always love, the scale of just how small the Falcon is as it's being pulled into this massive thing that is.
No, I was just pointing that out because it is a motif that comes up in a lot.
Then that's
manga
interesting.
It
definitely
might not be familiar with.
I'm not familiar with it as a motif. Like I said, my thought was just like, wow, that is a that is a very expressionistic decision. But as you're saying, this is something that is done quite often.
Often enough that I recognized it for what it was.
Right.
And yeah, I do love the wide shot of the Falcon being drawn into the Death Star.
So cool. Always so
Obi-Wan
cool to see.
being like, but there are alternatives to fighting. And the fact that from that point on, we like kind of lose track of our main characters, because this is where we're about to get our second act break as the Falcon is drawn into the hangar bay here. We have all the stormtroopers rolling in, everyone rushing around. We get this great double page spread of Vader coming into the hangar bay.
Oh man, his cape furling out like that is so awesome.
Just the barest hint of his gauntleted fist in the darkness around him.
He's coming for them, man. Once again, the feelings of like foreboding doom in this comic are so good.
No. And Vader coming in, and we're going to close on this last page where he's being informed that it looks like there's nobody aboard. It looks like some escape pods have jettisoned, and we get our last line here of our like midway point of the movie is Vader saying, "I sense something, a presence I have not felt since."
Great line to go out on. You can totally imagine the executive producer George Lucas, fade out on that.
I'm curious what you think of like that being our midway point, our act break.
I think I think they, much like the last issue, they've been very smart to find these cliffhangery moments where if you're just imagining this as a story and not an adaptation of a movie we're all so radically familiar with, that it is sort of like that's like a, oh no, how are they going to get out of this? That really works. That would be like, I gotta click play on the next episode or whatever, right?
But it's not necessarily where you or I would have called like, okay, if you're gonna split up A New Hope, where are our breaks? I know we did that in episodes past, but at like this particular moment is not one I would have picked.
We've talked about 4 is kind of 4 parts is an awkward number for a story, right? Because we think of stories in 3 acts generally. So even when you go from 3 to 6, that makes more sense, because you're like, okay, so now you're splitting each 3-act thing in half. Okay, well, that kind of makes sense, right? But 4 is a weird amount of acts in a story. So they so far have found 2 very interesting places to find natural sort of act breaks, or at least sort of cliffhangery situations where the stakes have been raised, the tables have been turned, we're in some kind of new setting. So it is like, oh no, it is making it Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru's death is a real distinct shift in the story. Now our heroes captured by the Empire is another great shift or reversal in the story. So very smart, very, very smart on how to structure it. It seems like there's much more thought to it. It's not just like the other one just feels like, yeah, this feels about like 22 pages of comic would just kind of stop right here. That's enough.
Yeah, no, and so far so good on this adaptation. I'm really excited to get to issues 3 and 4 of this book. Again, I've read ahead some. Yeah, we will not be disappointed. I'll put it that way.
No, and I trust that. Like at this point, I just think I'm so impressed by this. Just feels so much more, and it's not even just this manga specifically. Although like I said, that certainly gives it the most like intriguing. Where you're like, ooh, what's this gonna look like? Ooh, what's that gonna look like? But it just feels like the makers of this comic have just put so much more thought and time into it than particularly that 97 version that really felt very slapdash and just like, I don't know, we got to get this out. This is a promotional thing. Like, the only level of quality I would accept that as if like, well, that was literally packaged with the VHS set, that you'd be like, great, there's a free promotional thing that I can never think about again.
Or if they handed it to you at the theater on your way through the door. Yeah.
There you go. Exactly. Sure, man. Yeah. So
that was issue number 2 of Star Wars: A New Hope manga.
Really
we'll be
good.
Covering issue 3 next week and 4 the week after.
That's how that works. But yeah, of course, yeah. If you want to get even more content from us and help support the show, the best way to do that is to go to our Podbean patron page, which is patron.podbean.com/punchup. There you can get cool exclusive bonus content. from Gorgoni and myself, as well as from our other shows, including Material Components, your live play role-playing show. I always want to say D&D, but it's not actually D&D.
Just say D&D. Everyone knows what you're talking about.
Everybody knows what I'm talking about.
It's the Band-Aids of tabletop RPGs.
It is the Band-Aids of tabletop RPGs. I just don't want people to tune in and go, where are the dungeons and or dragons?
There are both, just not in ways you'd think.
Oh, there you go. There's that. There's the Action Shelf, where we review B-action movies. And there's Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters, where we are continuing, much like this, to track the nature of Star Wars comics history. We're tracking the history of monster movies. So be sure you subscribe to all of those. You can get those on any of your podcatching software, or those are also all on YouTube.
And I mentioned it earlier, but yeah, YouTube's another great place where you can partake in all of this. If you're just listening to this, I highly recommend going to check out the YouTube version where you can see our beautiful, charming faces and read the comic along with us to see the gorgeous art that we're talking about. If you don't have the physical copies in front of you, and the YouTube version, we are always displaying a digital version of that art as we're commenting on them.
Enjoy the show however you want, but enjoy the show however you want, but I definitely would say that this is designed as a video show in its optimal form.
Absolutely. And if you're already with us on YouTube, look, like, comment, and subscribe. All of those things really help us out.
Ring that bell.
Ring the bell. Yeah, that way you can stay up to date on all of our new releases for everything over at the Punch Up Entertainment Network. And let us know in the comments below, what is, of the comic book adaptations of A New Hope, what are the ones that, what are your likes and dislikes where some of these are concerned? Because, we're slathering and, drooling over this manga adaptation, but it might not be for everybody. So what are your preferences? Let us know.
What are you looking for out of a comic book adaptation of a movie? Because I find the whole thing to be very fascinating.
Absolutely.
So, that's, I think, going to wrap up this week's episode, though, Gorgoni.
I think it will indeed. And I have been Mike Gorgoni.
I'm John Campbell.
And as always, may the panel be with you.